Good evening, and thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm New York City Councilman Chaim, and you're listening to Chaim on the Radio. And we're joined here tonight once again by my co-host, Dr. Tzvi, who is with us via phone. We are filling in tonight for Zeb Brenner here on 620 on your AM dial, the Talkline Communications Network. Dr. Fay, welcome for another week of Chaim on the Radio. And how was your week?
Hi, Councilman. How are you? I have really missed you a lot. It hasn't been 1 week that we've been separated. It's been 2 weeks. And I'm missing you a lot. And I'm missing New York City, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, we had a very exciting week this week, Baruch Hashem and my family. First, my daughter gave birth to a baby boy, and he was named after my father-in-law. The name was given as Shalom and Lev for heart. My father-in-law had a outstanding heart. He always gave to others, and he was really, truly an amazing person. I have to say, most people don't like the in-laws, right? They always call them the outlaws, but my in-laws are very special. My father-in-law was extremely special, and I'm so proud and honored to have a grandson named after my father-in-law. So,
hi, and what's his name? What's the baby's name?
Shalom Lev.
Shalom Lev.
Lev, yeah.
Peace and heart.
Yes, peace and heart. And
Lev heart.
Very good, I think, yeah. Peace and heart. And I also want to give a shout out to my 5-year-old grandson Alex, who just turned 5. Happy birthday, Alex. He's probably sleeping, so he's not listening. But, with this crazy week, Dr. Fay, this really between the pandemic and the storm and everything going on in people's lives, it's always nice to have something, something to be happy about. And, we all go through so many obstacles and challenges throughout our life, so it's always good. And I know you had a few simchas recently, and, tell us about that. And also, Irina, Mazel Tov to Irina, one of your rages.
Yes, one of my children. Irina is getting married on September 6th, so that is super exciting. And my granddaughter, Ela, is getting married on September 8th, which is super exciting. But September 8th is my birthday. So my granddaughter is getting married on my birthday. So it's a date to always remember and celebrate.
So Mazel Tov to them and Mazel Tov to you. We're going to be having a very informative and exciting program. I have 2 colleagues of mine who are going to be joining us tonight. One from Staten Island, Joe Borelli, Councilman Joe Borelli, and Councilmember Bob Holden from Queens. And later on in the program, we're going to be hearing from Tzvi Weill, coordinator of the Flatbush Showroom Safety Patrol, of some of the efforts that they did during the last 48 hours during the storm. So I'm going to ask all our listeners to stay tuned, and we have a extremely exciting program. You don't want to miss this, trust me. You don't want to miss Joe Borelli, and you don't want to miss Bob Holden. And, of course, you don't want to miss Tzvi Weill. He's an amazing and outstanding person. So we're going to take a short commercial break, and we'll be right back. And welcome back. You're listening to Chaim on the Radio, 620 on the AM dial on Talkline's Communication Network, and I'm here live on the air with my co-host, Dr. Fay Zakheim. So welcome back to our listeners, and we spoke a little bit about the storm before the break, but in just a moment we'll be welcoming 2 guests to discuss it further later in the show. You'll also be hearing from Tzvi Weill, a coordinator of the Flatbush Showroom Safety Patrol. This week was a very destructive tropical storm that hit our city, leaving tremendous damage. Down trees and power lines still, littered the streets, and even 2 days later. City agencies and utility companies have said that this was the worst storm to hit since Sandy hit, and my district was affected by Sandy, and I remember those days, and it was horrible. And even the storm that lasted only for maybe 4 hours, 5 hours, the how it hit our city and the down trees and everything that's happening and the power lines, and the cleanup and restoration efforts will take, I would guess, the way it's going now, it would take weeks. And we all think in the 21st century it's going to take days. No. The way it looks now, it's going to take weeks. prior to the storm, my office set up an online portal to take storm-related complaints, and I'm glad that I did that because otherwise we'd be getting hundreds of emails. And only during the last few days, we received literally hundreds of issues that people submitted on this online portal, which makes it a lot easier for my office because we see all the issues on the portal, and then it gets forwarded to the agency or utility company to take care of. And it's not just like sending an email or sending them the information on the portal. And, we've seen it and working with my colleagues how we have to hound the agencies as well as the utility companies and be on top of them. It's not just like one phone call and goodbye. It's a lot of work, literally 24 hours a day. And during the storm, we were shocked to find that both 311 and 911 couldn't handle the call volume. And I myself called 911 on behalf of several different constituents. And it rang, and no one picked up. And finally, at the fifth time calling, I had to wait for several minutes before I got connected to an operator. And that is very disturbing, and it's very dangerous. And I know that this was a widespread problem throughout the city, and it's something that we will be discussing in detail tonight. And in the aftermath of the storm, New York has reached out to my office from all over, from Long Island to Queens to the Bronx, and even, yes, Faggy, from upstate New York. People have reached out to my office, all with the same problem, down trees and power outages. And it's been very difficult. And when I say people call me from upstate, Faggy, it wasn't you.
No, I'll tell you the truth. I think the reason I'm not coming in so clearly, because people are telling me, but I'm not coming in that clearly, is probably because we had a ton of broken lines over here as well. There were so many outages up here.
Yeah.
So, Chaim, I actually did call.
It's been so difficult here, and I can imagine upstate New York as well, and particularly for elderly people who cannot necessarily leave home for a few days because of fears of COVID, and then with the storm, and then some areas, trees fell down and just blocked their entranceway or exitway. And tonight I've asked two of my favorite colleagues to join us to speak about the storm in general, and as well as we're going to be speaking about some current events that are occurring here in New York City, on top of everything that's going on top of the storm, on top of the mayhem and the chaos and the shootings and the gun violence and COVID and everything that's going on here in New York City. You're going to be hearing tonight. So first we're going to bring both colleagues on at the same time. So first let me introduce Councilmember Bob Holden, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago and has joined us again tonight. He represents the Queens neighborhoods of Glendale, Maspeth, Middle Village, Ridgewood, Woodhaven, and Woodside in the New York City Council. And Councilman Holden's district was hit hard by the storm. And if you follow his Twitter, you'll see how hard they were hit. And in Queens as a whole has nearly 30,000 customers still without electricity as we speak, more than 48 hours after the storm. So, Councilmember Holden, welcome back to the show.
Hi, I am glad to be back, and congratulations on the birth of your grandson.
Thank you so much. I remember the comment you made at the State meeting when I said I have a new grandson. What did you say? Come on, tell the listeners.
I don't know what I said. Listen, I'm just dealing with the storm.
You would be more. I think you said you'd be more than happy if the baby looked like my wife.
I think that was somebody else. It wasn't me. I wouldn't do that.
Okay. And, we're also joined by Councilman Joe Borelli, who represents the southern part of Staten Island in the City Council. In addition to having one of the funniest Twitter feeds in the Council, Joe Borelli also serves as a chairperson for the Committee on Fire and Emergency Management, and I serve as a member of that committee, and he has already announced plans to hold an oversight hearing about the failure of the city's 311 and 911 system. Thank you, Councilmember Borelli, for joining us tonight and taking the time and taking off from having a cigar and some little wine in your backyard, I see in your Twitter, and joining us here live on the air.
Well,
Well, I'm happy to be here. And how do you know I'm not drinking wine and smoking a cigar while we speak, Chaim? You know, and next time we have to do this live in person, and we can smoke together.
Well, we'll have you in Brooklyn. Just remember, if you come to Brooklyn, you have to pay for the bridge. And I hear that they're putting a toll on both sides of the bridge, whether you're coming or going. So it's going to be double cost.
No, it'll be the same cost in total. That's why myself, the Democrats, Max Rose, Jerry Nadler, a lot of Republicans even support it as well. It's probably going to take off some truck traffic from the Gowanus and the Battery Tunnel and the Brooklyn Bridge. So it's ultimately a good thing. So that's a good thing.
So thank you. So I just want to tell the listeners, Joe Borelli is a Republican in the City Council, yes, and we are friends, and we're also friends with Bob Holden, who's also a Democrat as I am, and also you have some common sense Democrats in the City Council, such as Kalman Yeager and others. So we call it the Common Sense Caucus. And I also want to give a shout out to Councilmember Steve Matteo and Councilmember Eric Ulrich, who was with us in the radio show just a few weeks ago, and it was very entertaining. So let's start with Joe Borelli. Let's talk about some of the things that we have seen during the storm. As I've said before, the 911 system, I personally called 911 and I couldn't get through until the fifth call. And even today, there was a homeless person on the street, and I notified homeless services. I also called an ambulance. He was totally passed out on the floor. So I called 911 to get an ambulance. And the 911 operator, yes, I did go through to 911, but the 911 operator couldn't even get through to an ambulance, emergency services, to respond. And she just hung up the phone and says, okay, I will keep on trying and I will send someone over. So let's talk about some of the glitches or some of the issues that happen with the 911 system.
Well, look, I heard your story about being unable to connect with a 911 operator. I heard some of our colleagues from Bensonhurst and Bay Ridge, Justin Brannon. There were some other colleagues who also had similar experiences. If there was one incident where 911 was somehow not able to be reached, maybe I would chalk it up as to an error on the part of the caller. But when you see a number of people who you trust and know are telling the truth, all have the same experience where they can't get through to 911, we have to be aware that this is some sort of systemic problem. 311 also had a lot of issues throughout this storm. 311 operators were unable to get to the phone. 311 operators were not giving people clear guidance on what to do with a downed tree, where it fell, if it took a wire down, et cetera, et cetera. Who's responsible? All these questions that people had. And the real issue, though, is we're in the middle of this upgrade of our 911 system. We're moving to a very high-tech digital system. And at the end of the day, we can have the fanciest system in the world, but if you dial 911 and it doesn't connect you very quickly to an operator who's qualified and competent and able to connect you with the service you need, then the whole system is moot. So that's what we're going to talk about once again. It won't be it's a joint hearing with Bob. Bob's who's on the line with us. It's a joint hearing with my committee and his committee, the Technology Committee, who has jurisdiction over the Department of Information Technology. And this is not the first hearing we had about problems with the city's 911 system. If you Google the New York Post or the Daily News, New York City 911 system, you will not see a series of positive news articles over the past decade, or really since 9/11, about how the city has been managing and operating this system.
But it's terrifying to know that in this day and age that a person cannot get a hold of 911. If something like this happens again, and we keep on saying it, even after Hurricane Sandy, people couldn't get a hold of and make a call, make that outgoing call to call for help. And this was back when Hurricane Sandy hit, and now we see the same problem. Like, didn't New York City learn from their mistakes? I mean, I know growing up, people learn from their mistakes, and that's how you get more knowledgeable. And
well, we did learn. So we did elect to spend about, I think the number is $240 or so million on a new upgraded system. However, in typical de Blasio administration practice, the contract has been botched, the implementation of the system has been delayed, and I imagine there's some sort of cost overrun that we'll learn about at some point in the future. This is a problem that we're aware of. There are problems related to this storm that I think very few people were aware of in the past. One of those is trees. I think I might have been the only person on the city council, no offense to my two esteemed colleagues on the line right now, but talking about this local law that was passed in 2010, which requires people to have street trees. We don't have enough money to maintain them. And if a property owner decides that the tree is dying in front of their house, the Parks Department makes it almost impossible, if not financially impossible, to actually remove or prune a tree. We had a windstorm, right? The wind itself wasn't strong enough to knock down any buildings. The wind was strong enough to knock down a heck of a lot of old, rotting trees that Parks Department and homeowners were unable to maintain, and that's what caused most of the damage. So, I think, as far as learning our lessons, if we're coming out of this storm with a new lesson to be learned, it's that we can't just allow the arborists and the Parks Department and the tree huggers of the world to determine tree laws that affect the outer boroughs. There was equally high wind in central Manhattan, in Brownstone, Brooklyn. They just don't have as much trees as my district, as Bob's district, and many other districts in southern Queens and southern Brooklyn. And that's where you see the most power outages, and I blame the trees.
Yeah, well, and we all blame the mayor.
Yeah.
But, I was talking to Bob. I was talking to Kalman yesterday, and we're talking about the tree pruning, right? So Kalman called up the Parks commissioner and said, he needs a tree pruned. And they said, I'm sorry, we don't do any pruning now. You have to wait a couple of years, right? So Kalman said, but I'm a councilman. What? This is my job. My job is to get things done. And Kalman was saying that this is why we're getting a lot of these trees down, because it's not being pruned properly, and the weight of the tree, and also, like you said, Joe, there was a tree right before the storm hit that I sent to Parks Department. It had a crack right down the middle, and I was called by a local resident who's going to be on the radio show a little bit later on, Tzvi Weill, and he called me up, and Parks Department happened to respond right away, like they were there taking down the tree. But there are thousands of trees like that throughout the city.
What they do, though, we're told, that they don't prune them. They prune them every 10 years. And so just imagine that. Once every 10 years is their schedule in the Parks Department, because they don't have the budget. But the worst thing is, trees kill people when they come down, and they killed a person in his car during the storm. But it kills people every year. A branch would come down, sometimes with no wind or very little wind. It's just rotted. And you also have insects that eat away. If you look around your district of the trees that are down, you can see many of them are hollowed out because they haven't been inspected for either rotting insect or other diseases that take over the tree, and they could bring it down in a storm. And this wasn't even a hurricane, by the way. This was a tropical storm. So if this happens in a tropical storm, what about when we get hit with, God forbid, a hurricane, that's could be a 2 or 3 category, and even worse? My God. And by the way, I have in Queens 10,000 trees that have been reported on 311 that are downed, and only 25 crews to handle the trees, to cut them and so forth. How long will that take? I mean, you were saying weeks. I could say months to handle that many trees.
Yeah, and when I called the Parks Department a few days ago, all 3 of the machines were down. The ones that cut up the trees, the shredders, they were all down, and they sent me one in the morning as soon as one was up and running. But this is, it's a major problem throughout. And
we were so unprepared for this storm. Talking about what Joe was talking about, 311 and 911, I mean, you have to know that you're going to get a call volume that's going to be, through the roof during something like this, a tropical storm or a hurricane. So you have to prepare your system for that. That means, additional operators, and you have to tell them what to do and, give them directions. So you should have meetings. We don't know if this happened, so we will get to the bottom of it.
Yeah,
look, I mean, our hearings.
Look, to pile on what Bob is saying, so many of the questions to 311 could have been ended by the 311 operator. Look, if a tree fell on your property and no one's injured, and the tree is just lying in the front of your house, it's the homeowner's responsibility, perhaps even the insurance company's responsibility to take it away. It's not necessarily a government solution. Just telling the person that and giving them the right information rather than starting a whole hullabaloo could have helped people right on the spot, but people were giving constituents the wrong information.
I just tweeted out, Joe, this afternoon of 2 trees that are uprooted, leaning against 2 homes, 2 separate blocks, and also over wires. So I reached out. It's like hanging over the wires, the trees, and it's literally, if there's another wind, they would fall down. So I reached out to the Parks Department, to the commissioner, and he said that they're waiting to take it down, but they need Con Edison to respond to make it safe for them to take down the tree. So I started tweeting about it because I sent an email to Office Emergency Management, and in the interim I sent a few tweets out. They responded. OEM responded. I'm still waiting for Con Edison to respond. And I have to say that Con Edison has been, I don't know about the Queens and Staten Island, Con Edison has been very responsive throughout the year. Like when I send them an email, it could be 11 o'clock at night or even 2 o'clock in the morning. They respond. At least they respond, and they give me the information of the ETA. The problem here now is what we're seeing is that we don't get the ETR of when the people are going to get the power back. And that's what's so frustrating. So tell me, the power's coming back in a week from now. So this way I could tell my constituent, you know something, for the next week, prepare yourself, find your relative, someplace you can go, and prepare yourself. But when you don't get the ETR of when they're going to restore the electric, then it's like you're an elected official, you're supposed to represent your constituents, and they want answers. So if they can't get answers from the city, they want to get answers from the elected officials. And I've seen, how both of you have been very vocal on social media and getting things done. And I saw, Bob, you've been tweeting. You asked for FEMA to come in. Let's talk about that. And, Joe, I think you called up President Trump. No?
Not yet, but
not yet.
We probably should
at
this point.
We did. We actually did.
Aid from other states.
Yeah, we reached out to FEMA, and we got the White House also and asked them, we need your help. And they said, well, the governor or the mayor has to ask. And, I was on the phone with the OEM commissioner, and she said, well, essentially, they're not going to do anything. They won't be able to do anything very quickly. It'll take a lot of time. I said, this is going to take a lot of time, so let's start asking them. And, the problem was the governor didn't declare a state of emergency for over 24 hours after the storm. So that means that we couldn't ask for private contractors to come in to remove the trees, and we couldn't get the necessary help. So there's a lot of things that went wrong in this, and again, it's going to take weeks and weeks to straighten this out with the current rate, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I sent out a tweet today, and I wrote, and I guess since Manhattan isn't impacted, Mayor de Blasio doesn't feel the need to be vocal about the 70,000 plus New Yorkers who are still without power. And I have a feeling we would be seeing a lot more interest from the mayor if Gracie Mansion had lost power. And that's the truth. You haven't seen anything on social media and any word from our mayor about this. There was zero leadership on holding the agencies and holding the utility companies accountable. I mean, we pay our electric bill and we expect the service. And yes, stuff happens. But, people shouldn't be waiting 3-4 days or a week. Now they're saying that the electric for many will not be turned on till probably Sunday, right? And I've seen you've been posting about that.
I'm shocked the mayor hasn't come down. OEM has a command post set up in my district. It's fairly large. It's for the whole borough of Staten Island. I'm surprised the mayor hasn't himself come down at least for a photo op. And I know photo ops are frowned upon and aren't really solutions to problems, but it does show that the guy actually cares. Like you said, if this was happening in Midtown Manhattan, the mayor would be out there with his raid jacket on, his city seal emblazoned on his chest, doing the whole thing. And this guy has been absent. Frankly, the OEM commissioner, I don't think she's been too up front. Look, when it snows, we always see those pictures of the mayor and the OEM commissioner and the sanitation commissioner. These are all people who have very specific roles. Someone's got to clean up all this debris from the street, and we just haven't had that same urgency, as evidenced by the fact that there hasn't been any real storm-focused press coverage.
Yeah, and it's, when you see that the person who's supposed to lead the city not showing interest, then why should the people working for him, the agencies, care as much, and even the utility companies? If the leadership doesn't show anything, then you become all lax, right?
But where's the plan? Where's the National Guard to come out and start cutting these trees? Because it'll take, like I said before, weeks and weeks, and people are trapped in their homes. I have seniors that can't get out of their homes, and I have blocks that are totally knocked out. And by the way, Staten Island got hit hard. I think you have something like, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, 16,000 outages compared to the population.
We were up to 30-something, and now, thankfully, we're down about 6,000 or 7,000 left.
We were 40,000. Right now, Queens has more outages than the rest of the city combined, the rest of the boroughs. So, you have a lot of outages. Let's bring in help. Let's bring in outside help. And they say, well, the state's bringing in 25 additional crews to deal with the trees in Queens. Well, you know what? If you had 400, that still wouldn't be enough. 25? Are you kidding? For the size, for the borough of Queens? You know how large it is? You know how many trees there are? 10,000 down?
And Bob, if you wouldn't have been making the noise, you wouldn't be getting this extra manpower. And it's only because you've been vocal about it. Otherwise, it's like nobody cares, right? And
but
that's
again,
why.
But when Governor Pataki was, because my wife works for Governor Pataki, when he was in there, he brought in the National Guard to cut trees down in western New York, and they did a great job. They cleared it out. He didn't leave people trapped. So I think this governor's got to get involved. He's got to, visit the borough, come down and look at it. I mean, did not declare a state of emergency for over 24 hours, that's crazy. With all the trees that are down, all the people that are trapped, all the people that don't have power, we still don't have power here.
So how easy it is to have a plan, right? Once you have a plan in place, an emergency plan in case something like this happens, how easy it is to go ahead and to have a plan to bring in extra manpower, to ask the state to bring in, extra help, and just to get those resources available. Why do you think these things don't happen?
Well, again, it's mind-boggling. It's just administration. They don't pay attention to detail, and that's what you need in a storm. You have to have a lot of, connect a lot of, things and connect people to people and to agencies. But we're not seeing that at all here. We're just seeing a very frustrating situation. I mean, my staff is constantly working to try to get people freed from their homes, and we just don't have enough staff to really do that in the Parks Department. Nor do we have Con Ed trucks. So they should be bringing people in from. What Con Ed said? It took a long time to bring people in because what was happening in other states, people were unsure. The states were unsure that they weren't going to get hit with the hurricane, but. You know what? You should have a plan in place. That means if the hurricane hits, if it hits hard, this is what we're going to do. This is the plan we have to go to. These are the trucks that have to be brought in. I'm not hearing that.
Yeah, and imagine you pay your bill late, right? What happens then? What would happen if people who were affected just don't pay the electric bill? And another thing that wasn't mentioned really, and I just saw it in I saw in social media today, that people out there should and must call the Public Service Commission. They should call Google Public Service Commission, the New York State Public Service Commission, and if you don't have electric, any issues with utility companies, just make the phone call to the Public Service Commission. And I'll give you the number. The number is, for those who want to jot it down, it's 1-800-342-3377. Or you could try another number that they have is 1-800-342-7728. But just Google it, the New York State Public Service Commission, and hold those utility companies accountable by calling up and making a complaint. And it works. The Public Service Commission, it helps. I've done it before. My office has been calling them when we have issues with National Grid or Con Edison. And it's not really the people in the intergovernmental of Con Edison, because they have been very nice to me. I have to be honest, like I said before. They're always responsive, and they're always on top of things, but it's above them, and they bring the information to us, which is helpful, because then we could pass it on to the constituent and give them, true information, real information. But during the storm, the information was like, oh, we're still working on it. We still have to assess the damage. Like in my district in Manhattan Beach, they still have no electric, and doesn't look like anything's going to be happening until Sunday. And then we had a home for people with disabilities, and they just got turned on today, like late this afternoon, and people had to sit there with no electric. And then you have the elders, and then you have people who are in life-sustaining equipment. So we have major challenges ahead of us, and especially with the climate we have now, with all the liberals being elected in the city council. And Joe, you're a Republican.
Yeah.
And I always tell everyone that if you live in Joe's district, if you live in Councilman Joe Borelli's district, I would tell you to be a Republican, because the Republican has the majority there, and you always have a Republican who gets elected. But if you live outside of Joe Borelli's district or Steve Mattio's, you need to be registered as a Democrat, because you have probably 10 to 11 Democrats per one Republican, other than 2 districts in Staten Island. And we can make an election by having people. We have thousands of Republicans, but not enough to actually elect someone. So usually in New York City, except for those 2 districts in Staten Island, the majority, 95%, Democrats get elected against the Republicans. And I know, Joe, you don't like to hear that from me, because you're a hardcore Republican.
As long as we send more people that are going to join the Common Sense Caucus, then it's A-OK in my book.
So let me tell you a little secret, and I hope my listeners are listening. But I did reach out to the Trump administration 2 weeks ago. I had a 45-minute conversation with them in a conference call, and I spoke about the stimulus package. I spoke about the bailout, and we also spoke about the unemployment extension for the pandemic insurance. And finally, we also spoke about the chaos that's been happening here in New York City, and especially what happened at City Hall Park, where you had thousands of protesters outside just painting and graffitiing. Dead cops are better than live cops, and cops are pigs and everything. And I spoke to the Trump administration about that. That was on a Tuesday, and I told them what's going on. Wednesday morning, all of a sudden, the NYPD came in and cleaned up the entire park. And what I was told by them is that they said, either you do it or we do it. And like you always call, and Bob, you say the same thing, that, we need law and order here in New York City. We need to stop these gun violence. And I have met with people from the BLM over the last few months, and they're on the same page when it comes to the diaphragm portion of the chokehold bill that needs to be amended, when it comes to the city council voting to defund the NYPD. I mean, who would ever think something like this would ever happen, to defund the New York City Police Department?
And again, they've given into the protesters, the anarchists, and we talked about this last time on your show. But it's mind-boggling that the city council comes up with this magic $1 billion defunding, and now I think people are having second thoughts already when they're seeing crime go up. And now we're hearing rumblings that we have to amend the diaphragm bill. And I hope we do that soon, because the cops are demoralized, as we know. Crime is still going up. Shootings are through the roof because of disbanding the anti-crime unit. I mean, that is totally insane, because they take guns off the streets. That's their number one charge. So it wasn't hard to figure out that this is going to happen when you start doing anti-cop rhetoric. You give in to protesters, and you legislate based on protesters. Body politics doesn't work, and in this case, you were giving into the crowds of many of them were just, they're so young, they don't remember the bad old days in New York. I do. I think, Chaim, you remember some of it. Joe doesn't remember anything like that, because Joe's he's a young man, but we remember. I remember the 70s and certainly the 80s, and New York wasn't a livable place then. And you couldn't read the subways were covered with graffiti. You couldn't read a subway map because it was so covered with graffiti. You couldn't look out the window. There were graffiti all over the windows, and we're going back to those days, unfortunately.
Yeah, so, okay, we're running out of time, so I want to ask you both if you could give a final message to our listeners. And Joe Borelli, I know that you chose to be on the Chaim on the radio today when you probably you probably could have been on Fox News tonight. So give a final message to our listeners, and as the Republican in the city council and a very pro-Trump supporter, and you're always in touch with the Trump administration. Matter of fact, when I needed someone's number, who would I go to? Joe Borelli. So go ahead, give a final message to our listeners.
Look, the message has to be to make sure people vote in primary elections. As you said, a lot of people are registered Democrats. We cannot continue to let crazy people run for office and win those elections. The elections in New York cannot be decided as progressive beauty contests. Otherwise, we're going to get the city council that we currently have and the mayor we currently have next year. So this is people's last opportunities to make sure they're registered to vote, they're prepared to vote, and they listen to candidates based on just who is competent to be in office. Look, people have been progressive Democrats for a long time, and if people are doing progressive things and it's helping somebody, that's great. But what we're seeing now is just this extreme, far-left, angry, mob rule, government by hashtag, and the only chance you, the listener, has to stop this is by voting against people who just deliver this garbage time and time again.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. And Bob, final message to our listeners for tonight?
Well, just to echo what Joe just said, we have to reject socialism. We're not a socialist country. We never will be, I hope. And I think what we have to do now is, like what Joe said, is get everybody registered, get your neighbors registered. There's a lot of common sense out there. There's a silent majority that is silent too long, and we've been very, very silent, certainly in the middle-class neighborhoods of our districts. But now we have to come out and vote. Mass voting in the middle class, and bring in candidates with common sense, and that's why we have a common sense caucus. So this is a very critical election coming up this November and in subsequent elections. Again, what they're trying to do is making voting by mail, which I'm concerned about. Everybody is, I think, that in my district is concerned that we can have a lot of fraud, but we have to make it easier to vote. I get it, but it's right now. It looks like we're headed for a disaster in November in voting. So, but we all have to come out. We all have to cast our vote, and that's very, very important. And by the way, don't forget to fill out the census. It's very, very important.
Very important.
Yeah.
So thank you, Councilmember Joe Borelli, a Republican from Staten Island, and Councilmember Bob Holden, a Democrat with a Republican heart and from Queens. Thank you both for joining us tonight. And we're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back with Flapper Sherman Coordinator Tzvi Weill.
TCN, Talkline Communications Network Radio, America's #1 Jewish program.
Welcome back, and you're listening to Chaim on the Radio, 620 on your AM dial, and I'm filling in for Zeb Brenner with my co-host, Dr. Faisal Chaim. And we are pleased to welcome my good friend, Tzvi Weill, who is a coordinator for Flatbush Shomrim, and Tzvi has masterminded and led some of Shomrim's major efforts in the community, including the huge oxygen tank collection they did during COVID. And Tzvi and I worked closely prior to and throughout the storm, and he also helped coordinate Shomrim's response in the aftermath. And Tzvi, thank you for joining us tonight. I think we lost the connection. We'll try to get a better connection. Oh, we'll try to get him back. But I just want to say how instrumental Flatbush Shomrim was, not only during COVID. And during COVID, I was working with several doctors, and one is Dr. Wurzberger, who had home hospital care during COVID, where people were able to have a pulse ox and monitor their vitals and send it into the doctor. And when they needed oxygen, God forbid, that's when Flatbush Shomrim brought over oxygen, and that was spearheaded by Tzvi. So Tzvi, welcome back. You're back.
Thank you, Chaim.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm back on the air. Thank you for having me.
And you must be upstate New York, the same place Dr. Fay was, with the reception wasn't that good. But I just want to thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I know prior to the storm, you called me up about that tree that was splitting in half, and Parks Department was extremely responsive before the storm. But now we're waiting for during and after the storm for them to be as responsive. And I know Sharon has put in a lot of effort in taking down, opening up streets. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, every good organization has a couple of parts to it. I mean, there's the pre-planning, and then there's the reacting. And if anything, the last few months have taught us is as prepared as you can be for anything. You know, there's always the reacting also. The organization, under the leadership, the executive leadership of Bob Moskowitz, has really taken charge of any needs that Flatbush has that we could help them with. And that was a lot of the reacting part. You know, Shomrim was founded as a security company, but in today's day and age, you know, when things happen, we just can't sit back. If we're a bunch of capable guys, responsible guys, and we use our heads and we get out there and do what needs to be done. So we're doing a lot of reacting. When it came to the storm, so prior to the storm, obviously we used all the social media platforms to let people know to fill up their cars with gas. You know, make sure they have flashlights, batteries, water. You know, just to generally to be prepared. Take patio furniture out, put it someplace safe so it doesn't come flying through. And then the storm hit. While the storm hit, I mean, trees were coming down. It was quite dangerous. But we still had guys out there just going around the streets and looking at trees that fell down and literally making sure that nobody was under them. Obviously, there was nothing we can do at that point, but just see that people are safe, that no one is in the car that it's smashed on, no one's in the driveway, no one's in front of the house. If a wire was down, we ran in the middle of the storm, we taped it off, you know, that area with caution tape. So we really were hands-on from before the storm started and straight through. And I would say about 4 o'clock in Flatbush, once the storm died down, we had already taken down many addresses of areas that were blocked, homes that were blocked, you know, complete streets that were blocked. And part of our being prepared was we did go out there. We went out there. We have all the safety gear. We had chainsaws. And we weren't looking to clear trees in people's backyards, but things that were of danger. Obviously, if there were no wires involved, if there were wires involved, we wouldn't come close to it. We contacted Con Edison. But, you know, different streets we opened up. There were plenty of homes where they had wheelchair people who needed to get out, people who needed to go to doctor's appointments, or even just a street that, you know, is a feral through for Hatzola or for EMS, you know, that needed to be cleared. So in a very safe manner, we cleaned those streets. We were out there, including tonight. Tonight we cleared away some more trees. So the organization has really answered Flatbush's needs. And I'll tell you that since the COVID hit, I mean, our hotline has become like a 311. People call 911, and I don't know what kind of answers they get, but they're calling us simply for information.
Yeah, I mean, 311 wasn't working during the storm, but the Flatbush Shomrim hotline was, right?
correct. And non-stop. And, sometimes you can go to a house and you can help somebody out, but sometimes on the phone you could let them know what's going on and calm down that family, which in return calms down the block, and a lot more than just that. So the calls itself, answering the calls properly and giving people information is as big a chesed as actually going to a call. So there's a lot that's going on right now, and Baruch Hashem, we've been able to respond and do what we can.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. People just don't want to be left in the dark,
Literally.
Yeah. So, and Flatbush Rum, I just want to say, Tzvi, that all the great work that you do, and the hotline number is, like you said, has been like a 311. Like, people call for anything and everything. When they have a problem, they call Flatbush Rum. And that is extremely important because you fill the gap of services that we're missing from New York City. We're missing from this administration. So you're there and responding. And I want to give a shout out to all the members of Flatbush Rum for all the great work you do. And I personally know, since I've been involved for more than 15 years, when I founded in 1991, and I used to come home at 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and I know what it feels like firsthand. And I really want to give a shout out to everyone, Borough Park, Crown Heights, Flatbush, all the members, all the volunteers, and Rockaway, all the volunteers out there who give of their time for others and not to expect anything in return. So, Tzvi, you have been an outstanding leader in the Flatbush Room. And you need common sense, just like you need common sense in the city council. You need common sense in running an organization and being involved, knowing how to respond and how to react and how to talk to people and to calm down especially. So, Tzvi, thank you for everything you do, and a shout out also to your father. I call him Mr. Mensch. He's the Mensch of the Midwood Mensch of Flatbush. If you see those yellow signs hung up with the speed limit and that person who saves you from that Unimeter ticket, who has those signs on it to remind you that there's restricted parking, that is Tzvi Weill's father, yeah. And that's the Flatbush Mensch. I want to give him a shout out. And
he always appreciates that.
So it runs in the family, and your father also, we had him on the show many months before. He's a Holocaust survivor. We had him on the show. We had a show about how Holocaust survivors give back now in these days in the community more than 75 years later. And when I had him on, I had another individual on who was a Holocaust survivor, and they both walked into the studio, and they haven't seen each other since childhood. Both Holocaust survivors. And it was such an emotional moment. So shout out to Mr. Weill, the Midwood Mensch. And when you see him out there, when you see Tzvi out there, when you see members of Shomrim out there in the streets, please go walk over to them and say thank you, because they do tremendous work. And while people are sleeping, they're out there doing work. So thank you, Tzvi. You have any last words for our listeners?
Last words.
Last words is the hotline number.
A lot is changing. A lot is happening in Flatbush. And if you're nervous, if you're scared, pick up the phone. Let us call us. We have a lot of information. We have a lot of capable people. And we're here to help. That's all we're here to do. We're here for the community. We're here for whatever the community's needs are. And we'll try to work closely with all the other Shomrim organizations, including Hatzalah and every other organization.
Okay, we're actually running out of time, so the hotline number is 718-338-9797. Tzvi, thank you so much. Until next week,
thank you, Chaim.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos.